check out this sick new stripped down set so you can focus better. You're welcome. Since my last video on slavery and racism in New York City, I've had thousands of people ask me to talk about the positive influences on race from New York. So I thought I would talk a little bit about its role in the civil rights movement. Now, most people believe the movement took place in the South from having seen protesters endure fire hoses in Birmingham, or Morgan Freeman solve racism in Driving Miss Daisy. But the civil rights struggle is, and continues to be, a nationwide movement. So New York has a rich history there. And it's important that you have a knowledgeable teacher guide you through. Okay. Because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat. I think DJ Khaled said that. DJ Khaled! The American civil rights struggle is usually placed in the mid-1900s, but the seeds were sown for it long before, with abolition, when the U.S. was barely a country and slavery was still legal. Rebellions took place since slaves were brought over, but they were always met with more oppression, and unfortunately, progress was only made on the slavery issue when the middle classes and white people publicly acknowledged its horrors. In 1785, for example, the New York Manumission Society was started to gradually abolish slavery by John Jay and Alexander Hamilton. Yeah, the guy who was killed in a duel and is now the subject of a hit Broadway show. Remember Broadway? I don't. Well, anyways, I've had an unsuccessful GoFundMe for the last 4 years to try to raise money for one ticket to Hamilton, so I can't tell you much about that, but I can tell you that against Hamilton's wishes, members of the Manumission Society were actually allowed to have slaves. Hypocrisy. Hate to see it. I'm told that to connect to the youth, I should use memes to convey emotion, so here's one to describe that situation. This is Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Anyone that's ever moved to New York to pursue a career in comedy after leaving a career in law knows that the masses of New York provide the comfort of anonymity and the ability to start over. That's why New York was always a popular destination for escaped slaves. It was actually here in 1838 that Frederick Douglass arrived as a free man after escaping his master in Maryland. He described his presence as one more added to the mighty throng, which like confused waves on the troubled sea, surged to and fro between the mighty walls of Broadway. Beautiful, but he would have sung a different tune if he was greeted by this New Yorker.
You suck! You're no talent! If you really had talent, go practice and then get yourself a gig instead of ruining the end of the day for everybody down here. You disgrace! You're everything that's gone wrong in this world. You're a self-consumed, no talent, mediocre piece of shit. And I've earned my right to say it. Okay?
Because of this, New York was also an important stop on the Underground Railroad, a system of tunnels and contacts that would transport escaped slaves to Canada. This is the Henry Ward Beecher statue at Plymouth Church in Brooklyn Heights, where Beecher, a known abolitionist, was a pastor. The statue was sculpted by Gutzon Borglum, who also designed Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. But I digress, which you do when you know too much. Anyways, the church helped so many slaves escape to freedom that it was called the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad. Beecher would also hold auctions here where congregants would raise money to buy slaves their freedom. Which is one really awkward way to do it, but for the same reason that I've kept this sick quarantine beard, Beecher knew that you gotta get people's attention. Beecher's sister was also Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, the anti-slavery book about the character Uncle Tom, which makes it really weird whenever my nieces and nephews call for me out loud. My name is Tom. They call me their Uncle Tom. The struggle for civil rights continued after abolition as black people fled the South to the North and New York, and their increasing numbers fought to change the city's ways. This is the Henry Street Settlement in the Lower East Side, where a meeting was held in 1910 to form the NAACP, with founders such as W.E.B. Du Bois. It continues to fight for the rights of black people today, and the acronym stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Colored people is not an appropriate label, okay, but that's the name of the group, so take it easy on me. Now, the modern-day civil rights movement is said to have started in the 1940s, when not only were people fighting for the rights of black people, but they were starting to win. And the reason there were victories was that sustained action had begun to change popular opinion, which reflects itself in the laws and in court decisions. This is the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. Now, when people think of bus boycotts, they think of Rosa Parks in 1955, who, by the way, had been a secretary for the NAACP. Sick callback. But the idea of the bus boycott was first done successfully in New York City. In 1941, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., the pastor at Abyssinian, organized a boycott of the bus service in Harlem because it wouldn't hire black people. He eventually became the first black congressperson from New York, and this is his statue on Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. Not very subtle, but I wouldn't mind a statue like that. The late 1940s saw some civil rights progress with the end of segregation in the military and some important court decisions. And it was in this climate that general manager Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers signed Jackie Robinson as the first African American to Major League Baseball, here at Court Street and Montague in Brooklyn Heights in 1947. Now, because of the attention and money they draw from all walks of life, there's a lot of pressure on athletes to remain apolitical. But in the case of Robinson, his mere presence was considered a social and political statement. Imagine carrying the weight of an entire people on your shoulders every game, with people saying the most hateful things possible to you.
You don't have health insurance. This is how you repay your parents for law school? You live with roommates in your 30s.
It was probably even worse than that. Big actions took place in New York City as well. On February 3rd, 1964, the biggest single-day action during the civil rights movement took place here in New York. Over 400,000 students in New York public schools stayed home, marched, picketed, or called in sick to push for integration of schools as they were de facto segregated in New York, and the schools for minorities had worse conditions. This is still kind of happening in a lot of places, by the way, so very relevant. White parents protested trying to protect the neighborhood school concept. Remember, throughout the 20th century and today, the counter-arguments to anti-racist policies rarely address race at all. Rather, they distract from the issue of race altogether. In addition to organizations and actions taken in New York, the city has hosted some of the most influential civil rights voices of the 20th century. This is Gleason's Boxing Gym on Water Street in Dumbo, Brooklyn. You're probably thinking, Tom, wait a minute, why would that be a civil rights location? Well, first of all, don't even think about ever interrupting me again. And second of all, any place can be a battleground for equality, even the boxing ring. In fact, this gym is where Muhammad Ali trained when he was in New York City. Ali famously refused to participate in the Vietnam draft to protest the war and also protest how blacks were being treated in the United States. He was subsequently banned from boxing for 3.5 of his best physical years, only to come back and regain the heavyweight championship of the world. That's some balls, man. I mean, some people get self-conscious about posting articles on Facebook because they're worried about comments from their racist uncle. Now, even though he is universally praised today, at the time, Ali was called unpatriotic and brash, which still happens today when athletes speak out. He was inspired by another leader with New York City ties. This is the 116th Street Mosque, where Malcolm X arrived in 1954 to found a chapter of the Nation of Islam after being released from prison. Now, this is a guy who converted to Islam in jail and taught himself to read there by going through the dictionary repeatedly. And having never graduated high school, he left prison to debate PhDs in front of packed theater audiences. In 1965, however, he was assassinated here at the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights. Now, while his militant style was controversial at the time, his aggressive approach was only a natural reaction to the aggression shown towards blacks by groups like the KKK and the police. And he imbued the black community with a sense of dignity and bravery to demand freedom. People often criticize Malcolm X's style as being too angry while also completely ignoring his message, which still kind of happens to some leaders today. I mean, this is like if you told your roommate, hey man, could you please stop eating my cereal? I already asked you once. And he's like, whoa man, why are you so upset? And you're like, I'm not upset, but I've already asked you once. Can you just please stop eating my cereal? And he's like, whoa, calm down. And you're like, dude, for the last time, stop eating my cereal, okay? I'll pay for it. Go down to Billy's Marketplace and get your own damn Raisin Bran, Chris. This is the Riverside Church on Riverside Drive and 120th, built by the Rockefeller family. It is famous for hosting progressive speakers like Nelson Mandela and Noam Chomsky, and it is here that Martin Luther King delivered his famous Riverside Church speech, where he first came out publicly against the Vietnam War and began promoting a black-white coalition for socioeconomic equality. a move that many and even his circle warned him against. People today cite MLK as an agreeable figure for his peaceful protests, but many of his protests were only peaceful on the side of the protesters and were often met with violence from the state and the city. He was also incredibly unpopular among white people during his time for his outspokenness. In fact, when he died, he had a 75% disapproval rating. Before I summarize, I hope that the millions of people who see this video realize that it's impossible to define New York's civil rights movement in a short video like this. Because one, this video was short, right? It wasn't too long, and it was perfect length, really. So, two, the civil rights movement is often defined by its heroes who have become household names. And they're pretty sick and all, but nothing would have been accomplished if thousands, if not millions, of anonymous people throughout history hadn't spoken out, marched, gotten arrested, suffered, or even died for the same cause. What this means, and what's easiest to forget, is that we all have the power to improve the world just a little bit each day, because movements can survive without leaders, but they can't survive without participants. DJ Khaled probably said that. Well, anyways, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please remember, this is not meant to be political, okay? Because I believe that the civil rights movement transcends politics. And for us to all come together and push forward to improve our country, we must transcend politics as well. That's pretty good. I just kind of came up with it. But anyways, please subscribe, like, comment, and follow me on Instagram, okay? Where I hope to one day have so many followers that I become an influencer and I can just post pictures in Tulum with my boys. All right, I'm just gonna hang out here. All right, with my new stripped down set. Looks very profesh. Thanks for watching.